Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us in class today. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call. 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line, 605-477-3249. With us for 2 hours, at the head of the classroom, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Welcome, Rick. Well, it's easy for me to say. Rick, you there?
Hey, my mic was muted. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I was saying hi, good morning, and Merry Christmas, and then just realized my mic was muted.
Well, it's great to hear your voice, and thank you for wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. In class, yes, Merry Christmas. And Christmas is the day that was selected. Well, December 25th was selected to honor Jesus Christ's birth. But we don't know when he was born. We don't know. So this day was selected, and all over the world, people celebrate his birth. And then the marketing guys decided that what a great idea. What we could do is we could turn this into a bonanza. And we can make people encourage people to buy, con them into buying things that they don't need for people they don't like with money they don't have. And I suggest that you avoid that and you boycott it. At the Finelli family, we are boycotting the marketing day of Christmas, which happens to be December 25th. Now, we're not boycotting Christmas. We're not boycotting the celebration of Christmas for the real reason. But we are avoiding being pushed into buying things for people just because of that day. Now, I think if you have friends and family that you want to buy things for, that's wonderful. That's really wonderful. But don't be conned into buying things that you don't need to buy for people that you don't like. If someone needs a pair of socks, I think it's great to buy socks. When they're on sale, when the price is right, and if you can afford them, and if they need them. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, how do you feel about that?
Don't get me started. You know, the whole thing is about marketing, and I don't know why they want to call it Black Friday. I mean, you know, what's that mean? After Turkey Day?
I can tell you what it means. In accounting, there used to be two columns, and there would be, and if you were running a deficit, let's say you were spending more than the income, you would put those numbers in red to indicate this is not a good thing. Or sometimes you would have the income side in black numbers and the expense side, you know, the costs in red numbers. And by the bottom line would either be red or black. You're either running a profit, you have more income than expenses, or you're running a deficit, which would be red. So Black Friday, what that means, although it really isn't described this way, what it really means is retail stores all across the world typically don't earn enough or don't have enough sales to generate profit to put them in the black, meaning so all the way through, let's say, November, they're running at a loss. But around Christmas time and the Christmas season, when people spend money that they don't have for things that they don't need, for people they don't like, sales go way up, and they now run into the black, meaning they're now profitable.
Okay,
but for
so
10
let's
months,
take a side turn here. Let's take a side turn and then say, well, then what does Red Dawn mean? And does that mean we're going to be invaded by a bunch of Africans from Ethiopia as immigrants? I'm confused.
Well,
the
Red
whole
Dawn
thing's
would
nuts.
probably, the Red Dawn would indicate communism because of the color of their flag.
Yeah, there you go. That's exactly. I'm just messing with you. The whole thing is stupid in that regard. I have no problem wishing. I was reading this article this last week where the Santa Claus guy was being arrested by telling children that he's not real. I remember when I was sitting in a bathtub, I was naked, and my grandmother was watching me, and I remember her telling her, I don't think Santa Claus is real. And she giggled, and I remembered her comments and how I have now cherished the concepts of imagination and what they might imply when a child, for the first time, sees all the different colors of Christmas. That's another picture I saw this morning in the news. This kid with the wonder on his face, just with all the different color and stuff that's going on. It's unfortunate that today, China runs everything. And the so-called black and red Mondays, Tuesdays, and all of that, and what's happened down in California with the fires, I am wondering if we haven't already been invaded and that Agenda 21 was a setup for giving California to China, which they own, by the way.
You're talking about at fire sale prices? Because
no, I'm talking about paradise and the burnout of 50,000 people that live down there that are now homeless and are not allowed to rebuild. And the fact that China now owns 50% of America, and that's what Red Dawn was about, the invasion of, I don't believe any of it anymore, and I'm becoming such a grumpy skeptic on anything being reported. It has ruined my belief in our systems. I don't know where to go with all of this.
Rick, you said something that, you've been saying it for a while, and I've taken a page out of your book. You just said it again. You mentioned that you're becoming grumpier, and you're exaggerating when you say that because you're not a grumpy guy. But
well, stay tuned on that, man.
Here I have taken a page out of that book of yours, and I'm becoming grumpier as well. Not all the time. I mean, I don't walk around with a scowl, but I would say it this way. I have a very short fuse. And when I see something that's wrong, I blurt it out and I become angry about it very quickly and then I get over it. I'm talking about people who cut me off. There's no reason to do that. People who park their carts in the middle of the aisle and then abandon them for a few minutes while they just wander off, zoned out, not paying attention, talking on their phone, and they're discourteous to everyone around them when they're at the Chinese factory outlet with their cart, or they're at Sam's Club with their cart, or they just leave their carts in the parking lot of Sam's Club or Walmart to be pushed downhill by the wind into some other cars. People just don't care, don't give a darn, and it's outrageous, and it makes me angry, and I have a short fuse. And so, grumpy, that like ignites my propensity to be grumpy. Okay? Absolutely no question. When people are careless, reckless, and endanger others and others' property needlessly, it makes me angry very quickly. And I launch into a quick tirade. And I blast the people who do that. I mean, I've yelled at people in parking lots that just take their, they have aisles. And cars go up and down the aisles. And usually there are arrows that say go up this way and down that way. Sometimes cars go the wrong way, in relationship to where the arrow says. So they'll go toward the arrow instead of following the arrow. I can understand some of that, and because sometimes the arrows are worn out. But what I can't understand is someone going crossways through the parking spots with trailers, long 20, 30-foot trailers on their trucks, driving through the lanes perpendicular to the lanes. That makes me crazy. It's just a great recipe for a crash. Because no one expects you to drive like that. It's discourteous.
What's happening? Okay, so what I'm observing is like a full moon, where everybody acts lunatic. And there's obviously something else going on, because the general mood, even within myself, I can feel the anxiety. It's as if there's a trepidation of some impending doom. I had a report 3 weeks ago, from Navy intelligence that was vetted as valid, suggesting there was going to be a major burp from the sun on the 12th yesterday. It didn't happen, but we had power failure out here in Oregon. I don't know how many other people had a power failure, but what's actually happening right now is that our sun is in a massive change, and as a result, there's a bunch of crap hitting Earth. And it isn't from the sun. It's a part of space that the sun is currently going through like a missile. And the Earth is, trying to catch up to the sun in a little helical pattern going after the sun. And what's happening is that the sun is running into stuff that it would normally absorb, but it's not, because it's in a solar minimum, which means it's going around the sun and hitting Earth. And right now, we are in a region of space that is full of dark matter. I have a theory now about what dark matter may be and what may not be, but for the moment, it's going through what physics would call dark matter, and I can feel it in my own behavior. I don't know what it means. I don't know where it's going to lead. I'm not comfortable with it, and I think I'm going to go back to bed.
When I was in elementary school, I had a science class. I want to talk a little bit about that. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, and so we've got Mark on the line, Mark in Illinois. So before I mention my elementary school class and the things I was going to mention, Mark will be with us. Welcome, Mark.
Hey, good morning. I just wanted to tell something real quick, is that when I went to a congregation in northwest suburbs of Chicago back in the late 90s, and it was during the time of August of 2001, there was a family that I knew, and he had like 7 children. He had 7 children, and they adopted a little boy from Africa. And anyway, they said to me at Oneg, after services, they said to me, we're going to New York City. And I said, where are you going? And they said, we're going to the Twin Towers. We're going to St. John's down in New York City. And I said, you don't want to do that. I said, I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen there. And the Lord wants me to tell you, you better not go there. And so they said, well, where can we go? Because they wanted to go to a historical site. I said, well, why don't you go to Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts? There's a lot of history there. I know the history there in New York City, but I said, there's the history of the Mayflower Compact, 1620. I said, go there. You could really have a good time there with your family, but do not go to New York City. And this was like the middle of August. And so I didn't know, only what the Lord told me. So I knew the Twin Towers were going to come down. I knew exactly what was going to happen before it happened. And anyway, I have witnesses, dozens of witnesses that actually heard me say this to these people. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because there's been many times in my life as a prophet, a modern-day prophet of Israel. I've been called in the office of the prophet, which is in the New Testament. And, I got to tell you that what's happening right now in America off the East Coast, what happened with this earthquake in Atlantic in Georgia, which, used to be connected with the ancient Atlantis. And if you go to the islands off of America on the East Coast, Cape Hatteras is an underground volcano, kind of like the movie Jules Verne movie with Mysterious Island. That is an ancient volcano that was part of Atlantis, because Atlantis was a group of islands that stretched all the way across from the Gates of Hercules, from Africa, all the way across America. It made a U-turn and went to the Scottish Islands, and it came all the way across to this country. And that volcano that is underneath the Atlantic Ocean on our East Coast went active in October when I was there in North Carolina for the Feast of Tabernacles, and it was during that time that volcano went active, and it sent a wave out when it did, and it hit Scotland and England, and you can go look this up. And there was a place in Germany that was monitoring it, and with like Honolulu and Hawaii with the Navy, and they monitor all stuff with the oceans. And so this place in Germany was monitoring it, and this 30-foot waves hit the Scottish coast and the English coast, and it actually broke off part of the cliffs, and they went into the ocean because the fishermen noticed it within the next week, and they took pictures of it, and so they had pictures, and then they had satellite reconnaissance too. And so this wave was from this volcanic eruption underneath the ocean that goes underneath the abyss, which the submariners in the Navy off of there in Nova Scotia and Gander, Newfoundland. And anyway, this volcano, it's going to blow. And I've been warning people for 15 years, probably 17 years, about this, since actually 2001. And I prophesied to Tom Bearden about Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden, retired Army, about Katrina before it happened too, and then the other one that happened after Katrina, and so what I'm telling you is the East Coast is going to go underneath the Atlantic Ocean, and so is Florida, and it's going to be permanently. And you better, I'm telling people, it's coming. You better get off the East Coast permanently.
Well, I'll tell you what, Mark, I'd love to hear Dr. Richard Allen Miller's comments about this, and I'd like to ask you a couple quick questions, actually 3 questions, when we come back. Can you stay with us for a little while?
Sure.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us, Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Mark is called in from Illinois, and Mark, you made some comments. I'd love to hear Dr. Richard Allen Miller's thoughts on that. Rick?
What would you like? What?
Well, Mark talked about he foresaw Katrina.
Oh, you're talking about the volcanoes off the East Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. Yeah, well, guess what? Everything's in flux right now. You can, from using infrared satellite, you can now see lava as far as Ohio from Yellowstone. Now, right now, there's lava strikes that are being shown up in the northern territories above BC. There was one strike that was shown down in the Trinity Alps showing that the Pacific plate is moving. Your New Madrid fault line is so unstable right now. The concern I have is all those nuclear reactors. And with the earthquakes that he mentioned early when he first came on about feeling the earthquake in Atlanta from Oklahoma last night. This is a part of what's happening with this dark matter that I have talked about that's now hitting the earth and causing the earth literally to expand. The earth's actually is kind of like a molten ball and isn't really round. It's actually oval and is starting to expand and wiggle. And when it does, plates shift, magma moves, And I have no idea how it's all going to play. My concern about the Midwest is those 21 Daiichi-like GE reactors. They're all leaking, just like they are on the East Coast with 3 Mile Island all the way down into Florida. And up in New York, what is that, Indian Point, I think it is, that's leaking into the Hudson River. They're actually able to measure it. I'm concerned that we don't have proper reporting so that you know what to think and how to prepare for something like this. That's the part about the disinformation and false flag news reporting. I remember a time when I used to worship Walter Cronkite. I thought he was an exceptional news reporting. When Dan Rather came on, I started to hump back a little bit, and I switched over to CNN. CNN has gone completely rogue. They're possibly, right now, the most worst disinformation source there is. And what counterintelligence is about, and the way it's defined, has to do with lying by omission. You tell the whole truth, but not the whole truth. You tell a partial truth, and it's very misleading. Are we into global warming or global cooling? Is it man-made or is it natural? How come we can't answer that one?
I could answer that.
Well, I yes, but not as a scientist and not as a politician, as a self-seer that we have no measure of credibility on. I got that part. The problem is when my parents, they're dead now, my girlfriend's parents, Julie's parents, watch these things. I just posted a thing about lying to oneself and Pinocchio and how the different generations are literally offended if I were to say anything against our government right now. And I have some questions. And I'm, as I was a Navy SEAL. I mean, what's going on? And if I can't answer that, there is something wrong in Guacamora. Seriously. And the
we have to go back to the scriptures because everything in the
scriptures. Okay, now wait a minute. I taught at Harvard for 11 years and did my own biblical translations. What scriptures? There are so many of them, and so many of them have been convoluted into politics, like the Constantinople, that I have to tell you, at this point, the only thing I trust is myself. And that's
I trust the scriptures because the law,
yeah, I mean,
the Moses and the prophets is still, in play today. And if you go back and, like I said, you get this little book, Joshua's Longest Day, it's filled with scripture. It's not based on what some man thinks.
Yeah, but it was written in Old Hebrew and Greek. And who did the translation? And I'm here to tell you that when I did my translations, of the Torah, for example, I found there's a passage in there that states that there are at any given moment 50 living Christs on earth at any given moment, and only 2 of them are for men. That means saints. Individuals that literally came back here to serve men as God's will. And the other 48 of them are doing things for God that have nothing to do with man, according to the Torah that I translated. Now, I don't hear any priest talking about anything like that.
Well,
and I studied with Gershom Scholem.
Yeah, when the earth turned over, and I did talk to Dr. James McKinney, who's a physicist such as yourself, and he said he wrote about this in one of his books about the earth turning over. And so this is a science that is based in the Torah and the law of the prophets, and the law and the prophets. And so this is something we have to go back to the scriptures to find out what's going to happen in the future, and what's happening in the present, what's going to happen in the future. And this is where the science comes in play. And this is what's happening. Our world is going to flip, and it may flip more than once. It may happen multiple times. And when it does, all these extinction level events are going to occur like a domino effect. And you know that's true.
What I know is that I don't know. And what I had originally trusted as valid, what's happened to the concepts of Watergate, where they will go for the truth and expose it? I don't see anybody doing that now. And
Rick, it's a
I don't know
mission.
what to think other than right now I'm like maritime law. I listen to myself, and that's where I find my truths. I don't know if that's valid, but I try to be a spiritual, a moral man. Not ethical. I'm a moral man. I actually try to walk my talk, and I'm telling you, the news today is so skewed. And what is a Republican and a Democrat anymore? I remember the look on my father's face when he realized he was no longer a Republican. My sister runs the Democratic Party in Washington State, and she's big time Democrat. And I'm watching. Is that it's no longer about nationalism? It's about nationalism and globalism. And at least I still hold pride in being an American, and I feel ugly. And I remember that time when I was becoming a SEAL, and it was Vietnam, and the war protesting, and a bunch of my friends were going up into Canada. And I had friends that I lost in the Tet offensive I grew up with. And I watched all of this meaningless things where old men were sending a bunch of young children off to war for money. I had enough. And I don't know what to do. And so I will speak out on national radio like I am right now, saying, if I don't know, and I'm trying to be a true blue, and I don't know what to do. I have serious questions about Trump. I know Clinton is a criminal already. So look at whom they're offering us for politicians. And you look at the local level. I would not want to be a politician if my life depended on it. I prefer to be.
I just want to interject, and it's not with politics. All the blame goes back to these modern-day prostitute churches that have prostituted themselves because they've rejected God's law and they rejected the prophets. And, you know, the Word of God, Jesus, the Son of God, is the Word of God, and He is the law, and He is the prophets. And these modern-day churches have done away with God's Word, and that's why they do not have the discernment to understand what's happening in the time that we're living to prepare the people for what's coming. And really all the blame goes back to this ecclesiastical religious system called Babylon the Great, and it's going to get judged.
Well, that's all well and good. What do I do for myself right now at this moment? I don't have an answer. I'm speechless, and the media is no longer, it's not even entertaining. It's
I've got a question for Mark. Mark, you said that you prophesied Katrina. Did you also foresee Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island?
I did with Fukushima. I actually left a paper where I lived at. I left it behind. The Lord told me to leave it behind, and I put Japan on the paper, and I put nuclear disaster. And that was in March. That was probably I think it was beginning of March when I left Sterling, Illinois, and I left it behind in my apartment because I had a brother that I knew that he took the apartment. But I'm sure if they found the paper, they would have seen the prophecy that I left on the paper. Yes, so I did prophesy Fukushima before it happened.
Okay. I'd like to ask you, well, we can date stamp and time stamp it right now. right after the commercial, if you see anything else that you would like to tell us about, and maybe the timeline that you see it. So, Mark, in Illinois, what do you foresee, and what is the timetable that you foresee it? We can put a date and timestamp on it right here at USA Prepares. As today is December 13th, 2018. The time, Central Time, is 9:52 a.m.
And today is the 10th month of the Hebrew year, the 13th day. And when I traveled the Gulf Coast in 2002, December, I was in Gulf Shores, Alabama. I traveled through Biloxi, Mississippi. I went to Louisiana, and I was in Fontaine Park on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain. And I was going to go into New Orleans, and the Lord said no, because I was only like about a mile from the bridge. And the Lord told me no, because he said he was bringing judgment upon the coast. And that's why I was down there, was to warn the people, and I did. I warned people of what was coming about Fukushima. I mean, not Fukushima, but with Katrina. And Katrina is a Hebrew name. And I warned the people along the whole coast. As I traveled the coast, I went into Texas, too, as well. I turned around in Texas. I came back. I can prove all this. I have lots of evidence to prove it all. And then after Katrina happened, I was on the phone with Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden down in Alabama, where he lives at, and I prophesied to him all my calls, and I made many calls with him. All my calls are monitored and recorded by the NSA, such as they are now. And so, many prophecies that I've prophesied as I traveled throughout the country for the last 20 years. I gave up my business and stuff like that. But as I traveled throughout the country, what the Lord called me to do, and every place I traveled, I would warn people of what people call natural disasters, but I believe that they're all from God, because he's the only one that's in control of them. And I would warn people before they would happen. And so I have dozens and dozens of places that I've traveled, and many different people that could testify, and even the government could testify, because they record all of our phone calls. So the thing that I know that he showed me in 2002 was two things that were going to happen. Was the Gulf Coast was going to be taken out, and the next thing after that was going to be the East Coast. And I did prophesy to Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bearden about the hurricane that hit right after Katrina, prophesied on the day that it would hit and the time it would hit and what it would do and how it would come in and go out and come in and go out. It did that like 4 different times. But anyway, I just know that there are comets. I know that there are comets because they were here before in the time of Moses, and they've been here other times, and they're a pair. And they're traveling. And I know people may not believe that, but they're affecting this world, and they're going to flip this world more than once. And the East Coast is going to go, anything within 50 miles of the East Coast is going underneath the Atlantic Ocean. And that
Mark, when you talk about flip the world, are you talking about looking at the globe, looking at the world as a globe, and turning it upside down? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I'm talking about it's flipping on its axis. I'm sure Doc Rand knows the physics of all that, but you can read about it in the book that I mentioned to you, called Joshua's Longest Day, because it is in the scriptures. And this man who was in artillery, who taught at Yale, and this book was published in 1890, but he gives the scientific methods, because that's what he taught at Yale. He taught military science and tactics. But what I know that the Lord has shown me is that the East Coast is next. In Florida, if you live in the state of Florida, you better get out of there, because Florida's going underneath the Atlantic, and it's going under permanently, and so is the East Coast. Anything within 50 miles is going under the Atlantic permanently. That wave will be 150 feet tall, moving at 100 miles an hour. And it'll come out of the Atlantic Ocean way out. When it hits the coast, you'll have 20 minutes to evacuate.
I'd love to hear Dr. Richard Allen Miller's response to this. Hour number 2 of USA Prepares with Dr. Richard Allen Miller. Website, richardallenmiller.com. Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. If you'd like to see his offering, peruse of the books that you can buy from that website. And I suggest that you consider that, as I have a number of them right here at the farm. Mark in Illinois is with us, and Mark has mentioned, and I'm paraphrasing, that the Earth will flip on its axis, and that will happen in the future. He said that it happened in the past, and that if you are within 50 miles of the East Coast, you are subject to being underwater. You'll have a 20-minute warning. There will be 150-foot waves. And I can tell you that I've thought about that, and I've acted upon that, because I believe that the East Coast is a dangerous place to live, especially the low-lying areas, like Florida and parts of Virginia. And to put an exclamation point on that, Mrs. Finelli and I and the family bought a very small farm on top of a mountain in West Virginia, way up on top of a mountain, because we were concerned about that. And then we decided that there's a better way, and let's just move totally away from the East Coast. Let's go to the middle of the country, Missouri. So, Mark, I did act on that. That was, and you and I have never talked about that. That should be brand new information to you and to the class that I did that.
Yeah, I did.
But it was a cabin. Excuse me?
Yeah, yes, it is. Yeah, I've never heard you say that.
Mm-hmm. And I believe what you're saying is true, but I don't know the cause of why there will be massive coastal damage. I don't know if it's a tsunami. I don't know if it's an undersea volcano. I don't know if it's an earth flip. I don't know what. But I was concerned about it. I still am concerned about it. And that's what I did, literally. So what confidence level do you have that this is going to happen, and within what time frame?
Well, what the pastors, what the ecclesiastical people in America don't teach, because they don't know the law and the prophets, they rejected God's word. What I see written in the scriptures is the resurrection is coming, and there's going to be a great earthquake, and there's going to be a light that's going to shine out of the heavens. It will be like maybe for 24 hours, because, some parts of the world, it's light here and it's dark, and so it's going to last for at least 24 hours. And this light, I believe, is from the comets. And anyway, the resurrection of God's people, Israel, the bride of Israel, are going to be taken up, and those that are left upon the earth are going to have a chance to explain what happened, right? And those that are left alive. And that's called the marriage supper of the Lamb. That will be the next thing that will happen after the resurrection, will be the marriage supper of the Lamb. But the people that are Israel, for his bride that he's coming back for, he's going to resurrect the first ones that are the second half of the first resurrection when Christ rose from the dead, and the second half is what's coming. And then we're going to have an opportunity to witness to people of what just happened, because a lot of people don't know, because the pastors and these ecclesiastical, they don't teach this. And so they don't believe the law, and they don't believe the prophets. And so the marriage supper of the Lamb will happen, and that those of us that are left alive on the earth will be caught up in the air. After that happens, World War III is going to break out. There will be nuclear war. 20 cities, I believe, in Canada and America will be totally taken out with hydrogen bombs. America, I think probably less than 1% of the people of the North American continent are going to survive the extinction level events. and World War III. That's what I really believe. I believe it'll probably be less than 1% of the entire population of the North American continent that survives.
Rick, what do you think about all this?
I don't. Have my mouth full. I was eating breakfast. I think the survival ratio is going to be much higher. I think a lot of people will survive. I know that what he's talking about, there are different kinds of pole shifts. There's a magnetic pole shift where the actual pressure on the Earth comes from deep space rather than from the sun. That's the heliosphere. That's the big bubble that protects us as a solar system. Then there is the magnetic literal pole of which the Earth spins that's actually changing. And the South Pole and the North Pole are moving toward each other. And how's that work? And the new center for the pole is probably going to be somewhere around Missouri, according to Bert Bolin, University of Stockholm, Sweden, others that are geomagnetic experts in physics. I don't know when this is happening. It's the magnetic fields have shifted several times. 2010, we had a pole shift, and the pressure on the backside of the Earth was greater than that from the sun. That's when we were going through some ionized streamers in deep space and being hammered with other kinds of electromagnetic fields. The Earth right now is going through dark matter in deep space, and it's having an effect. The Earth is actually absorbing some of this material and expanding. And that's why you see cracks coming out everywhere as the plate is starting to break apart and shift. It's done this before. It's interesting that this epoch is called Tapesha in the Persian Bible forms, and that meant trial by fire. Of course, that could be electricity and nuclear energy. That could be volcanoes and coronal mass ejections from the sun. What were you going to say? I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me. I just said, yeah, I think it's all of it. Like you said, all of it.
Yeah. You can count on it because imagination is reality. Does that mean that we are creating our own reality? Yes. Does that mean we're creating our own apocalypse? Yes. It was Joseph Campbell that said that when you see the kingdom of the Father on earth, the apocalypse has already occurred. It is perpetual in its potential. It's the way you choose to see what's going on. Now, the good news is it means everything's going to change, which also means we have an opportunity. And that's one of the reasons why the so-called elite are digging in, because they want to be the first ones out of the cave to set up the new way everybody does things.
Can I just mention something real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting in the scriptures here when you go to Joshua chapter 10, but the place where this went down, where these hailstones came down in Joshua 10:11 upon the enemies of Israel and slew them, and there was from the comets, this tail from the comet, these hailstones, and this dark matter like you're talking about, all happened at precisely the exact time. But it's interesting that you know, everything that happened in the past is like you said, you taught Hebrew, and so you know that the construct of Hebrew is past, present, and future tense. So it's happening again, and it happened during the time of Moses. But what I see is the resurrection is coming, the marriage supper of the Lamb. God's coming back for his bride, his Israel, the 12 tribes. You read about it, the New Jerusalem. And when he takes his people out of this world, that doesn't mean you're not going to have a chance to repent, because you're still going to have God's mercy and God's justice and his righteousness and his mercy. He's still going to give people an opportunity to repent, but they're going to have to go through the fire. And Israel is the only one that can pass through the fire. Abraham went through the fire, came out. The Hebrew children went through the fire, they came out. God's people, Israel, can pass through the fire. And America's Israel. So God's going to, he's going to protect those who call out to him, and he knows the truth. He knows their hearts. And so, people, you need to get ready, because the resurrection's coming, marriage supper, the Lamb, World War III, and the second coming of Christ. And not only is war going to break out here on the North American continent, Iran, Russia, and China are going to invade Palestine, and they're going to come in through the back entrance.
There is,
Mark.
Edgar Casey said that New Jerusalem would be the new landmass that was formed around Mount St. Helens, Mount Olympus, and Mount Rainier when the West Coast went into the ocean.
Well,
that's Edgar Casey. That's,
I just prophesied a couple weeks ago about, I didn't say, I don't think I said thus saith the Lord, but that's what I meant about Mount Shasta is going to blow, and Mount Hood and Mount Rainier. And as soon as I prophesied that, this big earthquake went off in Alaska.
Yeah, those Alaskan earthquakes actually exposed lava. That's because of plate shifting. And the Aleutians are, you can watch it ring. So that's why they call it the Ring of Fire.
Okay. Mark, do you want to stay for one more segment?
Oh, sure.
Okay, because I've got a comment. I'd love to hear your response to it. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Mark in Illinois is with us, and I've got a couple comments. So back in the 1970s, when I was studying at the university, I knew that a financial collapse was going to happen. And here we are all those decades later, and it has not happened. So I don't look at it as it won't happen. I look at it as my expectations were early in the game. I still expect it to happen. And during the last, let's say 10 years, I looked at people at the meetups, I looked at people at the expos, and people who have called us at the farm and people I've interacted with. I thought years ago that there were 5% of us who actually understood that we needed to prepare and would take action. Then I revised my estimate downward to 3%, revised it downward to 1%, revised it downward to 0.1%, revised it down to where it is now, which is 1/100th of 1%. So what do I mean? I believe that there's only 1/100th of 1% of the people who are actually planning and doing things in the preparedness mindset on all levels. I'm not talking about just going to Sam's Club and buying a bucket of freeze-dried soup and powdered oatmeal. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who, and living in an apartment at that time. I'm talking about people who are not in the apartment, who have gotten out of the apartment, who have gotten out of that development, that neighborhood. They've gotten out, bought a farm, are operating the farm, who have acquired the tools, the knowledge to make that farm operational. Farm animals, plants, things that are sustainable with the supplies, the books, the tools, the spare parts to keep it going. I believe there's only 1/10 of 1% of the population, 1/100th of the population who have jumped out of their apartment, jumped out of their neighborhood, their development and bought a farm and are actively protecting their family from what is going to happen. And you and I didn't know each other, Mark, at the time when I started doing this, when I started teaching. You went throughout the southern part of the United States, the southeast, telling people what was going to happen. I did too. Most everybody did not listen. Most everybody did not listen. And that ties with something else that I wanted to mention. I had a discussion with Rich Shealy, one of our instructors. He's on every week with us and has been for years. He asked me last night, he called me and he asked me, this was off the air, just the two of us talking. He asked me if I thought that the level that we talk about economics was appropriate. And my response to him was, well, we could dumb it down. We could talk at a lower level, but we're not going to. We will not do that to attract the masses. The masses are going to have to come up to our level. When you go to college and you start studying, there is an assumption that you have gone through kindergarten, first grade, second grade, through high school, and that you are ready for college. I'm making the assumption that if people are going to be in this class, USA Prepares, they are willing to do homework. They are willing to learn on their own. And if they are not, we cannot help them. Therefore, 1/100th of 1%, I think, are going to make it. And I think that is somewhat near what you said, less than 1% survival, the extinction event, and World War III. Does that jive, or am I confused, Mark?
I do believe, like, in the resurrection, and I believe in the marriage supper of the Lamb, which is the pride of Israel. Those that are, the graves are going to get opened up all over the world. God's people, Israel, are going to rise from the dead. And I'm sure that's not really going to affect the communist China and Russia. But I think more of the rest of the world, the Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, kindred people are going to be, like, standing up and taking notice of what just happened. And maybe they may not understand it because they haven't heard about it from their pulpits.
Earlier in the broadcast, Dr. Richard Allen Miller mentioned, the candidates that we get to select from for our polling pleasure. And so where is a good choice? Well, we hardly ever have a good choice to express our opinions as to who we would like to be our CEO, a.k.a. President of the United States. Presidents are pre-selected for our polling pleasure. And these choices, it's like, which one of these people would you prefer? Not that you really have a vote, you just express your preference as which one you would prefer, because the determination for president is made by the Electoral College. Class, all the presidents, starting with George Washington, president number 1, through our current president, Donald Trump, are related to each other with the exception of one, Martin Van Buren. He's the only guy who is not related to all the other guys who have been selected as president of the United States. Now, who was Martin Van Buren? Well, he was president number 8. He was a New York governor, governor number 9 of New York. He was the Secretary of State number 10. He was vice president of the United States number 8. And he was a founder of the Democrat Party. So when we think that we are voting for the president and our vote counts, I got to tell you, I don't think it counts. As a matter of fact, I did not vote in the last presidential selection. I did not, because my vote didn't count. And if you paid attention to the mainstream media, they told you that Hillary was voted president of the United States by the popular vote, but that didn't matter because the Electoral College selected Donald Trump. Now, of the two, I absolutely positively prefer Donald Trump, and I feel bad for him because that swamp is really hard to drain. It's deep, and it's vast, and it's full of alligators. It's a mess. And that poor guy is surrounded 360 degrees, top, bottom, left, right, north, south, by criminals. and they want him out of there. And it must be very, very difficult to try to do what he's doing for the greater benefit of the United States. Rick, do you have a comment, or should we go on to?
Well, we can go on. I'm just appalled at the Democratic Party now advocating violence.
Yeah,
I don't get it. How can they do that? The Democratic Party is supposed to be the liberal thing, not the. I don't understand any of it anymore. Go ahead. Yeah.
Just like Mark said, the pole shift. They're just like the pole shift that many believe is coming our way. There's been a shift in Democrat versus Republican. It used to be the Democrats were the doves and the Republicans were the hawks. And what that meant was, Republicans liked wars. Democrats liked peace. Well then, but a lot of wars were started during Democrat administrations. So that was wrong. So I think there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation out there. But here's one of the things that I wanted to mention. So I was looking for our cat. Inky Joel New Kitty is his name. And there were many names for the cat. One was Inky, one was Joel, one was, he's the New Kitty. So his real name is Inky Joel New Kitty. So I was looking for Inky Joel New Kitty at night. He didn't want to come back into the house. So I was out there with my LED flashlight, and it has a beam that you can focus. And I focused it toward, as much of a pinpoint as I could get as I was looking through the woods at a distance. And I aimed it up. And what I saw was startling, jaw-dropping. It looked like I was in a dust cloud. The air was calm, no breeze. It's dark out. There are no lights where we are. No street lights, none of that stuff, because we're in the middle of nowhere. And what I'm saying is the LED illuminated all kinds of things in the air. It looked like you would choke if you were trying to breathe that stuff, and that you'd be nuts to get out there without a respirator on. Rick, I couldn't believe it. So I did it a couple days in a row at night. It's the same thing. There are these, it's almost like little sparklers are going off in the beam of the flashlight as they are illuminated. So either they're spraying us at night, or they spray us during the day and it falls down throughout the day and the night. Or the air is replete with particles that are killing us, because it can't be good for us.
What do you think it's doing to your DNA? What do you think that this is called nano? These are nanoparticles. They're so small. Instead of 80 mesh, which is your capsule, where you got 80 particles per inch, what you have is nanometer, 10 to the minus 9 particles per inch. The thing is so fine, it falls through your skin. You don't need to breathe it. Now, I can imagine what your lung must feel like. How about that congestion everybody's got? And check your panels, your blood panels, for aluminum, barium, lithium. It's quite scary. And now when you realize that we've been sold a bill of goods on a bunch of fronts. I just posted something on Facebook about medicine, and the idea that more people die of radiation poisoning than they do leukemia and cancer. The actual healing or the process.
The treatment is killing more.
Yeah, the treatment is worse than the ailment. And the ailment is in question as to whether it's real or not. I don't believe anything anymore. I don't know where to go with that.
As Vinnie Antonelli said on My Blue Heaven, I'm with you. I'm with you. I really am. Rick, LED lasers. You can buy them on eBay. Red ones and blue ones and green ones. What do you have any thoughts on uses for them other than for pointing?
They burn cool.
Any...
That means they're efficient. That means you have bandwidth specific for, let's say, growing crops indoors underground. Now, LEDs are perfect for that kind of situation because what broccoli wants to receive over celery is quite different in bandwidth. And if you're growing these things using Growlux or other kinds of grow lights, they all get hot. That's energy that is not going into the light part. That is infrared energy. It's gone to the Lord. And that means that light bulbs and all our traditional forms of lighting are extremely inefficient, and that LEDs are extremely efficient because they're cool. All the energy goes into the light itself rather than heat and or other kinds of phenomena, long ultraviolet, whatever. I have a concern because the body, the eyeball, for example, is extremely sensitive to specific bandwidths in blue, and you'll notice that all your LED using for lights on your computer all include a blue light. Those are hard on your eye. I mean, I'm serious. And your blue screen that you're using for, which is LEDs, again, that's the technology right there. It's harmful. Now, blue used to be related to relaxation and stress related. You have a blue room and you healed faster. But blue light, for example, on the eyeball, it's harmful to the optic nerve. And you don't want to be staring at that kind of thing. So, of course, law enforcement has had to ramp up their red and blue lights to the point where I can't, in my state, you can't even look at the cop car anymore. You can't because it hurts your eyes. And the so-called indium and what is the other one that they're using that's a bluer light than the yellower lights that we use on automobiles right now?
Yeah, you're talking about 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 degrees Kelvin. These blue lights, I can't stand them. I had literally, when they're coming toward me, I have to look away. Which means I have to take
and
my
the
eyes
police
away
cars will ramp that up in amplitude to the point where it's actually toxic. And that's a type of bullying. From my point of view, and I want to know who can justify. I don't want to be seen. You have no problem seeing a flashing light like that. And the amplitude that they use in the state of Oregon is verging on toxic. You cannot look at it. It hurts your eyes.
No question.
And it is hurting them. It's damaging them, actually. And so that's why you can't look at them, because you're trying to protect them, and they hurt, literally. Mm-hmm. And so technology is such a... And
they have ordinances against us putting red and blue lights on our cars. Like, can't do that because only the police can have red and blue lights on their cars, and ambulances. Rick, I was thinking back to elementary school, in elementary school science. This was one of the questions I had for you. When I was learning about the sun in elementary school, I was told that the sun is this ball of gas, and it's burning, and it provides heat and light and energy to the earth, and it's stable. It's going to be doing that for millions of years. Well, when I was young, let's say 12 years old, I was cutting lawns with our little garden tractor, if you will, in the village where I lived, and I had to loosen rusty bolts, and I used some of my money to buy a torch. I think my parents would be arrested for a young person at, let's say, 12 years old having a torch. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, RichardAlanMiller.com. If you'd like to peruse his website and buy some of his books, the same books that I have here at the farmhouse. So, Rick, when I was in elementary school back in the 60s and 50s, I learned in earth science that the sun was this big fireball, and it burned really hot, and it was consistent. And, and in millions of years from now, it would burn out. I was kind of worried about that, but our teachers told us that we don't have to worry because, we'll be long gone before the sun expands and, burns out. Well, I had this Burns-O-Matic torch, and Burns-O-Matic was a company that was founded in 1876 by a man named Otto Burns, B-E-R-N-Z. And in the 1940s, he came up with a torch that you could buy, a disposable propane torch with a cylinder that you could either buy new cylinders at the hardware store or you could refill them. And so I experimented with my torch, and I used it to loosen bolts and nuts and things like that. And I'd run out of gas. I mean, that cylinder would be empty. And I'd either have to buy a new cylinder. And by the way, the whole kit was $9.95 list price back when I bought it, $9.95. Now they're $50 for that same one used on eBay, that same vintage propane torch. Well, the point is I would run out of gas. And I couldn't understand how our teachers could be correct that the sun would be, burning for millions of years at the same level. It made no sense to me. None. So my question for you is, if my torch cylinder runs out of gas, the sun's going to run out of gas. Everything that's on fire is going to run out of fuel at some point, isn't it? Weren't we taught the wrong thing?
Everything's changing. It's not you're losing it and it's burning out. It changes into something else. And the sun is no longer seen as a ball of gas. It's seen as a ball of liquid. The liquid, and that is the new model. In looking at the sun, we see it now as a ball of liquid, not a ball of gas. It's much, much more dense than gases ever could possibly exist. Plasma aside, the sun is like a major controlled nuclear fusion going on as it's exploding. And it's so big, you should take a look at the size of Earth next to the sun and realize just how much gases or liquids are on fire. And what does being on fire mean? Does that mean it's breaking down into something more fundamental, like carbon? What does a sun do when it goes nova and then turns into a dark, brown dwarf or a neutron star that collapses in on itself? There is interesting science fiction Richard Forward wrote called Neutron Star, and it's about a life form that develops on that and how that life form would be different than man, because a neutron star has got such high gravity waves as to require only 2 degrees of freedom, not 3. You can't move in this direction or that because the gravity fields are only moving in these directions. And that sets up a whole new concept of the way of looking at things. And it's all arbitrary. That the way we choose to see something, burning up or turning into something else. Where did the planets come from? What are they? And are they part of the sun? Or are they debris from previous suns, and this sun happened to capture them? These are questions I can't answer. I don't know. I have theories. And the theory that you might have is to solve a problem so you can have a solution. And, of course, your solutions are what dictate which doors you can live and open.
Dr. Richard Allen Miller, thank you so much for being with us today.